Hi, my name is Megan, and this is my informative speech. Here's my brother-in-law, my boyfriend, my sister and nephew. Dr. Joseph Murray, a plastic surgeon, in a 2004 article entitled "Transplant Pioneers Recall Medical Milestone." We didn't even think of history. We thought we were going to save a patient. I work in the medical field, so I'm always wanted to learn more every day. I'm always interested on how much medicine has actually changed from the past to the future, especially with transplants. I never knew much about transplants, but once I did the research, I couldn't believe how many complications they actually went through back then. The first ever transplant was done in the mid-1900s. There were many complications, but nowadays, medicine has changed. Today, I will be giving you a preview of when the first transplants have taken place, the complications that they went through, and how much medicine has actually changed. The kidney was the first to ever be transplanted. In 1954, Dr. Murray was the first doctor to perform the first ever transplant. He performed it to a very sick man who had chronic nephritis, which is a kidney infection. The recipient got his kidney from his twin brother, and which is really good because it decreases his chance for rejection. The recipient ended up living for 8 years after the transplant. Then in 1963, Dr. Starzl was performing liver transplants. He performed 5, where the first bled to death during the operation. The other 4 ended up having complications like infection and a failed graft placement. Then finally, in 1967, he had his first successful liver transplant to a little girl who lived for only a year. Dr. Shumway, in 1968, performed the first ever heart transplant. The donor and the recipient had to be in the same hospital at the same time due to the fact the organ could only be out of the body for an hour back then. Now it's a few more hours. The recipient ended up living for 19 months after the transplant. The first transplants caused many complications due to the fact of them never being performed before. As you heard in the first liver and heart transplants, they never lived very long. Before the transplants had actually taken place, the doctors had many trials performing them on animals before they could even perform them on humans, due to the fact the doctors had no idea how to even perform these at first. They had to figure out the steps, they had to figure out what complications that they would have to look for. They had to figure out exactly what they had to do to make an organ transplant successful. The doctors didn't have the medicines like we have today, like immunosuppressants. Back then, the immune system would fight the organ and end up killing the organ, which causing rejection and then death. They also had complications of infection, failed grafts that were in place. Also, pneumonia was a big one back then, because back then they didn't know that prolonged bedbound people would develop pneumonia, and that is a very bad thing, because that infection with the lungs would then affect that organ, specifically causing the organ to die and reject. The medical field changes every day, making new procedure protocols. According to a 2016 published article in the National Kidney Foundation, tells us that in 2014, 17,107 kidney transplants had taken place that year. Every day, they are performing successful organ transplants due to the fact of evidence-based practice, protocols before, after, and during surgeries now, which is amazing, because this is how people live longer lives with better transplant protocols. In 2008, the first near total face transplant had taken place. This was due to the woman. She had very severe injuries due to a gunshot wound to the face. It took 22 hours for them to perform this procedure, which is crazy. That was a long time for a procedure. The reason why she decided to have this procedure is due to the fact she couldn't breathe through her nose, she couldn't drink from a cup, and she couldn't eat solid foods very well. Over the years, transplants have changed from learning how to do them to them being performed every day. From the first transplants to current medicine, a lot has changed. They perform them every few years to every single year. In the mid-1900s, the first ever transplants were performed. They had complications, but learned from them. Now medicine has changed so much, we perform them every single day. In a 2005 book, Organ Transplant, A Survival Guide for the Entire Family, Tina P. Schwartz, a freelance author, noted that getting a transplant involves so many pieces falling into place at one time that it is amazing anyone ever receives a transplant. Thank you.